Very good. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll begin the Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting for today. We have not officially changed our name yet, so as soon as we do, then we will all get new shirts and new letterhead and all those kinds of things, but that hasn't been official yet. So we have a fairly brief agenda today, so and it's actually quite windy today, so I had to use a little extra glue on my toupee, but other than that, it's good. All right, we'll start with agenda item number 1, approved Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting minutes of the 10/5/21. If there are any changes or corrections, we'd be happy to hear that. Otherwise, we would accept a motion. And I just wanted to mention, we appreciate Jessica's online and Joe Rosso. And so thank you for joining us, and we will make sure that we include you in the conversation. Thank you. All right, do we have a motion or any other comments or questions?
Move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, report on tax increment financing districts. Jim.
Thank you. We have 2 things you'll be considering today for tax increment financing districts. So I thought it'd be helpful to see what we've done in the past and how some of the current districts are faring. This first table, this is one that Commissioner Petcorn likes a lot, shows the difference in the pre and post value of TIF districts that have closed. These are fully on the tax fully on the tax rolls already. Before these districts started, they cumulatively had a base value of $9 million. That increased to up to $392 million. So it shows how these do benefit the city financially in the long term, in addition to kind of cleaning up brownfield type areas in the community. These are current tax increment districts. Again, you see the value on average is 10 times the pre-value. Several of these will be closing out over the next 3 to 4 years. And so again, I think these are former brownfield type sites that were redeveloped and now have a much larger increment for the future, as well as being more attractive sites in the community. These are what we'd consider public-private partnership districts. We have a new section in our policy for these types of districts. The value of the increment is somewhat understated because a portion of each of these districts is receiving a tax exemption, and so this is the value of the increment reduced by the amount of the tax exemption. So those values are actually quite a bit higher, and when the districts close, really between these 3, it'll probably be up to $150 million when it's all said and done and they're completed. And then finally, these are in progress TIF districts where the project is either under construction or the construction is not even yet started. The Oak Grove Housing and Bruhala, Oak Grove Housing has not yet started. Bruhala, if you drive by there, you'll see the structural steel and precast is going up at a pretty fast pace. So just want to see if you have any questions on any of these districts. If not, we can.
Jim, I do have a question. It's just one more of a little bit of context, and that is in your research and summary here, have you ever had the opportunity to research comparably sized cities around the region to see if we're doing more or less or about the same as a Sioux Falls or a St. Cloud or a Rochester or something like that?
I have not done a lot of research on what different people are doing. Some cities will do maybe more districts, but they aren't quite as large. There'll be a relatively small district that maybe only adds $1 million or $500,000 in value. And some cities will have a real large TIF district that may encompass more of the entire downtown, where
Sure.
If you go back and look at this one, we have 3 TIF districts all within a few blocks of each other, and rather than have a real large one, we've tended to do them a little bit more smaller and more targeted in the downtown.
Bruce?
Mike, I hope you're ready. You showed up not hoping to speak, but Jim, that was a good question, and because of that question, it's been around for a while. We have engaged the services of a company called Tischler Weiss to do that very thing for us, and so we're just kind of launching that, and hate to steal your thunder, Mike, but maybe you could help us out a little bit, exactly what we're going to be.
Yeah, just real brief. Thanks for the question, Jim. And the brief response there is that we're going to be doing a kind of comparative analysis of what we're doing here in our market relative to other regional sized markets. We provided a consultant with a list of a few cities that we'd like to kind of zero in on in particular. Their reaction after taking a look at our pilots, at our TIFs, is that they think we're largely in the ballpark. But if there's some better ideas or new understandings from other communities of how we can use incentives, well, we want to try to bring that back here. And so that's the same group that I think we talked about maybe about 2 or 3 months ago here at Tax-Exempt Review. So they're in process right now, completing their first task of work. They're going to be working through the end of the year into early 2022. And we'll be sure to come back here and provide a report to this committee about what they find. And, but we're learning a lot, just about what we're doing here. And it was really a good validation to hear some national consultants say, you guys have got a lot of activity going. And they were most impressed with what's happened in the downtown and with the Renaissance Zone stacked with Pilot and TIF. And they understand that it's been a huge opportunity for us to be able to move the needle in Fargo. So thank you. Thanks. Great question, though. Thank you.
Jim, can I ask one favor from you? First of all, I really appreciate, obviously, I like that first slide, but the one where you have the TIF districts that are current, if you wouldn't mind, if you could add, and maybe this is impossible, to when the estimated closing time is. So I don't know if you can do that for those,
Yeah, actually, I do have that on a larger spreadsheet that we were trying to put out. That's a good point. I can bring that to you. But, just going down the line, in both the Horse Park through Bison Block 2 will all be done, probably in the next 5 years.
No, I appreciate that, and I know you're trying to keep it as simple as possible for my benefit. Obviously, I'm not the brightest bulb, so I can appreciate that. But I just think that would be good information, because it's like, I think a lot of these are closing, and sometimes the critics were saying that, hey, you let these run forever, and I think we're doing a much better job of keeping track of when they're closing. So Bruce, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was kind of my question, too. I assume that the terms associated with these kind of vary, and I don't know if it helps or hurts the table, but I just thought, it seems like it's always a question of interest is how long do you run these things? So.
Yeah, I should have left that on these tables. I can bring it to your next meeting and also email that out to you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I really appreciate the information. I think that's good for all of us, and it's good to have it. A lot of people watch these online, and it's good information to get out to the public so they can follow what we're doing. So, and I do think we're trying to improve the system. That's basically what this study that we talked about. We're trying to not only find out how are we doing it, but are there cities doing things different than us that we can be doing better? And so I think that's part of our study too as well. So anything else you want to add about that, Jim?
No, not on that item.
Very good. Yeah, Kent?
I just did have one question with regard to the one TIF with a negative increment. Is that because we removed the Mid-America Steel properties out of the riverfront TIF?
No, the riverfront with the negative increment, that's because many of the condos in the city center lofts here to the north went, the Renaissance Zone tax exemption started kind of right as this TIF district started. So, and those are 5-year Renaissance zones. So in 5 years, that'll reverse itself.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add one thing real quick, and it's a little bit off topic, but if you ever have time to go and drive by where the Mid-America Steel, the buildings have all been removed now, and so you can actually drive in there and see, but when you start looking at the lot and the layout, it's just very exciting to me. I think it's a good thing that we're not going to be able to develop it right away. There's still a lot of things that have to happen, but when you look at that, how the layout, how it's, buildable towards the street, but then it goes towards the river, it's just going to be, it'll be a great thing down the road for us to look at. So otherwise, anything else to add? All right, we'll move on to number 3, J Street Properties TIF request. Jim, you can get us started?
This site you'll probably remember for the fire that happened about a year ago. Just a short video of this. As far as, this being a blighted site, I was probably blighted before the fire, and certainly it's gotten worse. Unfortunately, no one was hurt in this incident.
I just want to add that it was during a city commission meeting, I believe, and so we were all present in this room. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Well, this is the other one in December. You're thinking of Mid-America. This is a air photo of the site. The property is currently owned by Gary Reinhardt, the developer that's working to acquire it. I believe they're scheduled to close December 1st. And so I know our inspections is still working on some code issues with the present owner, but it is headed towards getting cleaned up. This is just the site from the planning department and what it looks like on the ground today. A lot of the stuff has been removed. And next I'll have Mark Bjornstedt or Kevin Bartram probably get up and talk about their request. They're looking at putting 90 apartment units on the site, main floor parking, and there's a request for tax increment financing to help pay for some of the extraordinary costs of land acquisition, cleanup. So again, 90 apartments. Maybe I'll have either Mark or Kevin talk about kind of what they hope to have here. Our process now is that these requests first come to you before we do a lot of work on it and put together the development agreement and all that. And then it's just a one-time stop at the city commission for either approval or denial. So you play an important role in deciding which projects can we move ahead with. Mark or Kevin?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for having us today and considering this request. It's an exciting opportunity. Obviously, you've seen us here before. We're wearing a little bit different hats today. But we've been here mainly because of our interest in this neighborhood that's west of downtown, really where we see part of that downtown feel and the Fargo heart kind of creeping west. We also are just continuously impressed with how much of a corridor that First Avenue is becoming to downtown. And so we would love to see that neighborhood activated, beautified, more living, residential living in that area. So we bring to you this opportunity we have for a 90-unit development apartment complex on the former Woodchuck properties. One of the things we were interested in doing, along with bringing more living and activity to that neighborhood, was also in our design for the space to make that area more walkable, more usable. You'll notice that it starts to encompass the former 14.5 street. We're adding that diagonal parking in there and then wrapping paving around that street. So this becomes a really nice area where this currently is kind of an odd intersection back there where it connects back to NP is kind of gravel. There's some curb. It's not quite an actual street. This would make that area much more of a blocked neighborhood. And then one of the things we always loved about the Woodchuck property was kind of the weird, fun art aspect of it. We love that neighborhood. We love that it has its own vibe. So when we're developing the plans for this apartment, we're working in ways that we can do mural aspects, collaborate with local artists. The rendering shows kind of a repetitive picture there, but those would be all opportunities where we can inflict some character and kind of vision for the neighborhood and keep that neighborhood this fun artist, craftsman neighborhood that we really see it becoming. And Mr. Bartram here can give you some details more on the building and the TIF request.
The rendering that you're looking at, it's pretty self-explanatory. We're looking at enclosed parking on first floor, 3-story building, so it's pretty straightforward. The scale of the building is kept to that 4-story total, kind of on purpose for that area of town, rather than going to 5 stories or 6 stories. Seems to fit the scale of that area of town a little bit better. So there's enclosed parking, there's some surface parking, and then as Mark mentioned, we're we're hoping to kind of finish off the right-of-ways in and around those areas too, to finish off that block. We are in the middle of getting a phase one done. We heard just initially on the phase one that they're already probably going to recommend a phase two analysis because of some petroleum issues in and around that site. We don't know the extent of that yet, so that's a little bit of an unknown. But obviously, getting that site ready for construction, it's a pretty heavy endeavor to finish the demolition, finish the cleanup. I think the level of demolition or cleanup that you see right now, other than the odds and ends around the edge of the site, that's about what it's going to be when we take ownership. So we have quite a bit of property to demolish before we can make that site buildable. So there's still some research needing to be done on what we're going to run into there underground, but the stuff that we can see on above ground is certainly going to take some effort to get it all cleaned up, ready to go. So.
Can we go back a slide and can I ask you a couple of quick overall questions? That one right there. So, and maybe this is for Jim or the city staff. So the 14.5 street, is that a city street that has just not been paved, or can you tell me a little bit about that? And is that going to be something that we will do as a city and then they'll be assessed? Because to me, I think that's pretty important and maybe you know the answer to that question, but to me, to get those streets finished, obviously that's important for your project. And then the other question I had was, so I see everything in the blue line, that's what you're going to acquire. But to me, are you going to acquire the rest of that as well?
Well, to answer the first question, is our understanding is that 14.5 Street, which initially was J Street in Fargo's mapping, hence the name of the project. Kind of clever how we came up with that name, going off the old J Street. But it's such a hard thing to come up with names for some of these projects, so Mark and I kind of go back and forth on this. But anyway, 14.5 Street is public right-of-way, just gravel, so we would like to see that improved. We fully expect we'll have to pay some assessments on that. We've talked to some of the neighboring property owners fronting on the west side of the street, and we think that there's more than 50% of total with us included that would support paving 14.5 Street, improving 14.5 Street. We also would like to improve NP Avenue, extend that over to J Street or 14.5, that east-west block on the south edge of the property line. The answer to your other question is we would certainly like to acquire some more property just to continue to clean up that whole block, but I'm not sure we have a willing seller there yet. We still have a lot of conversations with the other property holders nearby in and around that area.
So maybe this is to Jim and our city staff. I mean, I do think we need to work on what the plan is with those streets, because I think obviously that's going to be an important part of the whole thing. Jim, can you maybe talk about that?
Yeah, the planning department has been working with this property owner and some property owners further to the east on a rezoning of the property to downtown mixed use, I believe, and maybe even coming up on your next city commission meeting. But yes, ideally, certainly 14.5 Street or J Street would need to be paved, and they're working with engineering on that. And then the east-west street also, I'd like to get that one paved also. But when they special assess streets, it depends on the level of protest, how much you can do. And so kind of depends on all the property owners in the area, being willing to support it, as well as city commission willing to create those special assessment districts. So.
But I think from your perspective, I think that would be good to know all this ahead of time, and and its engineering would be involved as well. And so I think it's an important thing. And I guess my other concern is, so it looks like they've done some cleanup, but obviously, so you're going to buy it within 2 months. Then are you going to complete the rest of the cleanup, or how will that work? Because to me, I drive by there frequently, and it looks like it started out fairly good, and then it's kind of got slowed down. So can you talk about that?
Well, yes, we're gonna have to complete the rest of the cleanup. That's part of our purchase agreement with Gary Reinhardt to finish the demolition of the building. If we did it before we have this TIF discussion, well, then the cleanup isn't really eligible for the TIF. So I think the TIF discussion really comes before the cleanup. So our goal would be to do the demolition, finish the demolition when we're starting construction, do it all at the same time, rather than demo it now and then come back and sort of remobilize and then do the construction in the spring. So we would like to do the demo and the construction all at the same time this spring.
I do think there's some giant giraffe. I think Commissioner Cosgriff would love to have that at his lake cabin, and his neighbors would enjoy that as well. So maybe you can update us with that.
The process from here would be as if you recommend approval of this, I'll work with the planning department as well as engineering on a renewal plan that'll spell out, how this would all happen. We would send their financials to our financial reviewer, determine what level of, TIF is appropriate. They'll take a look at that request and provide a recommendation. And so, maybe closer to the end of the year, we'll have a recommendation from both our financial advisor as well as a renewal plan and development agreement for you to consider.
Bruce.
City Commission to consider, I should say.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, I know that at our last meeting, we reviewed some proposed changes to the policy. So this will go forward to the City Commission before the revised policy is approved. But we do have a policy in place today. And so for Jim Boos and I, this clearly seems like it's blight, so it would qualify for TIF financing under our current policy. Would it as well with our proposed policy? It looks to me like it really fits either one.
It definitely would. I think our new policy is more focused on assisting projects like this rather than something that's in a green field. And also the City Commission did make that policy change, I believe, back in March, that kind of gave you the authority to set these in motion rather than going to City Commission.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I do have a question for Kevin, just on parking. Not a big deal, but it looks like this 90-unit apartment, 92 indoor vehicle parking. Is that assigned parking in that garage?
It would not be assigned.
Right, okay. And then 21 off-street, and if I'm not mistaken, if this is a rezone to a DMU, we don't have parking requirements in that zone, right? So.
Correct.
And then just on the anticipated new 14th and a half street and the diagonal, is there a time limit on that if residents were parking in that street? Or?
And I don't anticipate there would be.
Yeah.
The city could impose that later if there's some problem where there's a lot of demand for on-street parking. I imagine the winter no parking east-west thing would apply so they can clean the streets. But other than that, no, I don't think there'd be any time zones.
We're comfortable with the parking that we're providing on site as well without assigning parking places. There's
Right.
always a turnover. There's always a few vacancies.
Exactly, that was my point on that. I was going to say, if you were assigning parking spaces, I was going to say, you usually overbook parking a little bit. No one's ever there at the same time. And
Yeah, exactly right. Yep. So I think the idea of the diagonal parking is really more for the neighborhood than it is specific to this project. There's Ivy and Rose across the street. I think there's some benefit to them also to make this diagonal parking. And if we can't do it on both sides of the street, even to just do it on one side of the street. But we realize we do need to have some discussions with engineering on how best to handle that. Early discussions with engineering indicated that one bit of good news is that the utilities look like they're adequate in that area and that they're probably not going to need to be replaced. I think that maybe needs to be confirmed, but we're really just talking about a paving project, not utilities all the way up and down that area.
Any other comments or questions? We will accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve and just express my confidence in the applicants and his track record and reputation. I think are outstanding for this type of project, so I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. And good luck. And I do think we have lots to work on from our city staff's perspective too. So it'll take us a little bit of time. So I appreciate that. I do think this is very exciting. If you can look at a before and after picture of that particular site, that would be a great addition. That's just my own editorial comment. Number 4, consideration of a renewal plan for the NP Avenue parking lot. Jim.
Yes, we've had, actually, since some of us took a trip down to Lincoln, Nebraska in 2014, we've kind of come back here and done 3 public-private partnerships in the downtown, that being Roberts Commons, Block 9, and Mercantile. this is another site kind of in the core of the downtown where there are large areas of surface parking. And so for the past several years, I've been in discussions with Randy Thorson and Warren Ackley at Global Development about the parking lot to the west of their property. The city owns about 60% of that. They own about 40% on the eastern portion. And there are not that many of these large sites in the downtown where you can do mixed-use development. And also it's nice to see some infill development rather than surface parking, especially in the core of our downtown. And so we're very early in the process. We've been, Randy Thorson has been involving Kilbourne Group as a developer of the housing for this. So there's kind of three components here. Global Development would be redoing the Herbst building into some sort of hotel or venue, entertainment venue. There would be housing of maybe 150 to 200 housing units, and then parking could be anywhere from 500 to 600 parking stalls on that site. And we're real early in the discussion. I'm trying to follow the new policy that's not yet adopted, and so we wouldn't take this to City Commission until after the policy is adopted. But really it'd be a recommendation from this committee to ask the City Commission to approve the beginning of a renewal plan for this project. I don't really have any costs right now to know how much this is going to cost. We're early in the process. But when you look at the site, there's not only a lot of surface parking that the city and Global Development own, but to the north, there's 3 parcels that are also surface parking lots. Seems like in order to get infill development, you need to have parking, adjacent. And so if we were to build parking large enough, perhaps those sites that are outlined in the green dots could be redeveloped in the future. I know Mr. Booth, you're involved with a development group that has the spot along Broadway. I haven't talked to you in detail about this yet, but the more parking we have, the more we can clear out existing parking lots, build them up, and bring more development into the downtown. We've, I think, been successful on 3 projects. This is not an opportunity to do a 4th. So really the motion I'm looking for today is to basically keep working on it. This is just a little closer picture. You can see the surface parking lots and who the ownership are, but the motion today would be to move forward with a recommendation to City Commission that we spend staff time trying to develop a financial plan to pay for this. Would probably include a TIF district, would include private sector development, at least on the NP parking lot. I don't think anyone to the north is necessarily ready to go immediately, but certainly in the long term, that might be developed. I recall on Roberts Commons when we adopted that one, or that plan, the property to the north that is now Dillard was privately owned, and that person had very little interest in developing it, but by the time the garage was open, they were ready to go. And so sometimes ownership changes and then there's an opportunity for development. So be happy to answer any questions.
Bruce.
Jim, thanks. We just saw a nice detailed estimate of costs from J Street Properties. So the renewal plan, you don't have that for this particular proposed development, but the renewal plan allows you to get there so that we can base a decision on information, correct?
Correct.
This isn't a question, but my comment is the first question that any large employers, which there are more and more coming downtown, ask is, where are my employees going to park? And so that's the thing. I'm very concerned that we build this big enough, because to me, this is the parking resource for all those surrounding buildings. And so to make sure that we have enough capacity in this ramp to, let's say that all those hypothetically fill in up to the north, that's where their employees are going to park. And so that, to me, the on-street parking, that's for your customers, And all the employers, they want to have certain parking for their employees. I mean, that's just, well, it's like the city of Fargo. You have to have that or you're not going to come. And so it's kind of interesting. It's not very glamorous, but parking is one of the key things for economic development in the downtown. So
That's a key point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when we've looked at, if I look online at the commercial realty sites, I see a lot of vacant office space, and there's probably no way you're going to be able to rent all that vacant office space with our current supply of parking. I don't know, Jim, if you want to comment on that, but if we want more occupancy downtown, we need more parking. The other thing that this benefits is we've seen with activities and people that are visiting the downtown on weekends and evenings that the parking is used quite a bit on Saturdays and after 6 o'clock.
Jim, I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, I've had a few conversations with Mr. Gilmore about this plan. I can speak on behalf of the commercial real estate industry, I suppose. On that larger image that's on the screen on the upper right is a large office building that I handle the leasing and marketing for, built 51 Broadway, Dakota Center. And I do have substantial vacancy in that building right now. And in the last couple of months, when I have filled out requests for proposals for new tenants to come in there and take a whole floor or 2 floors of that building, I usually call Jim and I say, can I get 150 parking spots within a block? And it's hard right now. But with this, 3 years from now, it'll be a lot easier to answer that question. I think keep those buildings full. And then also on the, he mentioned, I represent, I'm involved with the group that has that surface parking lot on Broadway and the Fort Knox property, which has 2 floors of vacant office space on it that we're trying to get tenants in as well. And so it's very common in my industry, we get the question, where am I going to park? So that's, the city's made a lot of progress on this, but I think this is, as Mr. Gilmore said, kind of the last big chunk where we could do a project like this in downtown. And from the commercial real estate industry, everyone I'm involved with would be very supportive of this.
The other thing that happens, I believe, is our job is to look for the future. And obviously, office space fluctuates. There's times where there's more and sometimes less. And I think COVID obviously had a big impact. But I think we have to look at down the road. That's one of our jobs. And I do think it's a very important thing. And so any other comments or questions about it? Jessica, I apologize if I've been ignoring you, but I don't know if you have any comments or questions. Or Joe, you're also online, Joe Rosso. So
my only comment would be that we think about how to create more winter-friendly connections between parts of the city, if that can factor at all, or be a thought within the plan, even if it's parking to parking. I know that that's a question I get a lot of people being downtown. So something to think about.
thank you. Kent.
Yeah, Jim, I wondered if maybe just for the sake of the audience, if you could highlight the 3 P3 agreements we have in place, the impact upon the parking fund. I know the most recent one, the mercantile one, was leveraging system-wide revenues to a certain extent, almost to capacity. So how would these be crafted? Some of them have TIF contributions, some are completely self-sustaining at the developer level. So what's your vision for how this might pan out?
I mean, think of the 3 we did, the mercantile, that relies a lot on, TIF in the long term. There's going to be about $30 million worth of development there that'll pay some, substantial money as these TIF projects are completed. The mercantile, it's sort of the same thing. I think, we may be at capacity as we fill up these other, parking ramps. But yeah, this will be harder to do because we've used some of our capacity on the other project. The other factor, though, is that we're receiving some money from the sale of the Island Park ramp. It's down here, so that'll bring some money into the fund. We're looking at the feasibility of putting another level on the Civic Center ramp attached to the Radisson. That tends to be our higher price parking, and people pay more for that, so that could add revenue. So the short answer for Ken, I think it's going to be harder to figure out, and it may require some general fund revenue. but we don't know yet until we get into all the details.
Any other comments or questions? And so I guess, Jim, would you summarize what you're looking for at this point from us? What is the step that you want us to take?
I think the step is to recommend to the city commission that they authorize, staff, myself, the city attorney, and the finance staff to try to come up with a renewal plan and a feasible, financial plan to, do a development on this NP site. Again, we have interest from the Kilbourne Group to be the housing partner, as well as Global Development, and Randy Thorson, Old Broadway, to be part of that.
Okay, that might be the world's longest motion, so we're not going to do that. But I
Maybe recommend the city commission we develop a renewal plan for the.
But I also want to know what the steps, so, because to me, it's a very important thing, but there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's far from, this is like just the very beginning. And so, to me, I want to be careful what we're doing now, because I think there's still a lot more questions. I think it's great, but there's still a lot more steps, so.
I think the next step would be, probably the first step is to get our new policy adopted that'll talk about this. The second step is to have the city commission approve staff working on a renewal plan for this site. And the final step would be, once we come up with a plan and a way to pay for it, would be adopting a P3 agreement.
Okay, so we're getting closer. But to me, we're just going to act on today, passing that the staff begin working on isn't that just kind of?
And for city commission to support that.
Well, that's a whole nother thing.
Okay.
Whether they'll support it or not, those guys, you never know what they're going to do. But I'm just saying, for today, you want us a motion to proceed, have the staff proceed.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a shot at it.
Good, I was going to, but you run with it.
I'll move that we recommend to the city commission that staff begin work on a development plan for the area in question.
That's excellent, Commissioner Cosgriff, and that's why you're the brains of the operation, and I'm not. So do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. That's everything on our agenda. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.